Hey guys, tonight we drift into the quiet beginnings of a nation that didn't yet know what it would become. Picture yourself in a time when the maps of the world felt unfinished, when long voyages brought strangers to shores where forests seemed endless, and when life in the new world meant hardship, uncertainty, and the faint hope of something more. This isn't the loud story of battles and declarations you've heard 100 times. It's the slower rhythm of America being born, the kind of story that unfolds like a whisper as you fall asleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the current time in the comments. I love seeing how wide awake you are across the world when you press play on something designed to lull you down. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You close your eyes and imagine the sound of waves. A wooden ship creaks against the tide, carrying weary passengers who left behind crowded European streets for a chance at survival. The journey has been long, and the sea has not been kind. Salt crusts on clothing, food has gone stale, and the nights are endless with the rocking of the waves. You hear gulls faintly in the distance, and then land. A dense green coast, strange and untamed, stretches out before them. This is where the earliest seeds of America are quietly planted. Colonial life is anything but easy. The mornings are cold, and the nights are colder still. Settlers wake to the sound of roosters, to damp earth beneath their feet, and to the constant uncertainty of what the day might bring. Food is plain, often just cornmeal or broth, and warmth comes not from central heating, but from a stubborn fire that has to be watched through the night. Survival is the first order of business, not expansion, not nationhood, just making it through the day. Yet in the stillness, you notice something forming. Small gatherings, towns beginning to hum, people working together to carve out lives in unfamiliar soil. They build with wood and faith, their days measured by sunrise and sunset, their nights filled with silence broken only by the wind through the trees. And slowly, these fragile beginnings grow roots. Even here, quirks appear. Mainstream history tells you the colonies were serious places built on survival and religion. But the odd detail is that they were also full of taverns, meeting places where locals swapped stories, shared ale, and quietly complained about taxes. Scholars still argue whether the American spirit of independence was born in the fields or in those noisy tavern rooms where the candlelight flickered and laughter mixed with grievance. Life is slow, repetitive, and difficult. But with each passing season, the settlements stand a little firmer, and the sense that something larger is taking shape begins to settle like dust on every wooden table and every stone path. You hear the faint crackle of a fire, steady and reassuring, as the colonies move from fragile experiments towards something that, in time, will demand recognition. The years pass, and those quiet settlements grow into towns that don't feel so temporary anymore. Wooden fences surround fields, markets appear on muddy streets, and the rhythm of life feels steady. But underneath that calm hum, a restlessness begins to build. You can almost hear it, like a low drumbeat under the chatter of daily chores. The colonies are no longer just survival projects. They're becoming communities with their own identity, their own stubbornness. At first, the tensions are small. Taxes from far away Britain arrive like faint echoes, rules dictated by men who have never stepped foot on these shores. To most colonists, life is hard enough without paying for wars they didn't fight in. A few mutter complaints in taverns, their words drifting into the candlelit air alongside the smell of beer and wood smoke. Others write letters, their ink scratching across parchment in the dim light of lanterns. The mainstream fact is that Britain imposed taxes like the Stamp Act and duties on everyday items. Paper, tea, sugar, all to raise revenue. But the quirky detail is that, for many colonists, the tea itself wasn't the biggest issue. It was the principle. They were drinking plenty of smuggled Dutch tea on the side. Anyway, scholars still argue whether it was genuine ideology or simply irritation at being treated like second-class subjects that truly lit the spark of independence. Picture yourself walking down a narrow colonial street. The houses lean a little unevenly. The cobblestones are slick after a rain, and you can hear distant voices rising in argument. A crowd gathers, speaking of liberty and rights, words that feel heavy but exciting. You see posters nailed to tavern doors, calling for meetings, urging resistance. The smell of pitch and tar lingers in the air, ready for protests that often teeter on the edge of chaos. And then, the Boston Harbor. A moonlit night, cold and quiet, broken only by the soft splash of crates hitting the water. The Boston Tea Party isn't a grand speech or a battlefield victory. It's a simple act of defiance carried out in the dark, with hushed voices and hurried movements. Tea leaves swirl into the harbor, and the waves lap against the docks like a secret being whispered. To some, it's vandalism. To others, it's the birth of something bigger. The colonies become restless children who refuse to be scolded. Britain responds with tighter control, and the tension coils tighter, like a rope stretched to its limit. You can hear it in every meeting hall, in every sermon that slips a hint of rebellion into the words of faith. People are tired of being told what they can't do. Soon, that tension snaps. Muskets fire, not many at first, but enough to echo across the landscape. A shot in Lexington, another in Concord, the beginnings of a war that nobody expected to last so long or cost so much. Imagine the sound of it. Not the roar of cannons you might picture, but the crack of muskets in the misty morning, followed by silence, then confusion. Farmers, merchants, and blacksmiths stand against trained soldiers, their courage fueled more by conviction than by skill. The Continental Army forms under George Washington, a tall, steady figure who looks more exhausted than heroic at times. Supplies are short, shoes wear through in the snow, and morale wavers. But there's a persistence here, a quiet refusal to give in. Nights at camp are filled with cold fires and whispered prayers, the smell of damp canvas and the creak of wooden carts. Yet in that hardship, something unshakable grows, the belief that a nation could rise from struggle. Think of Valley Forge. The winter bites hard, snow crunches underfoot, and soldiers huddle together for warmth. They're hungry, their clothes ragged, but they endure. Mainstream history remembers this as a low point. But the odd detail is that some soldiers passed the time drilling under a Prussian officer named von Steuben, who introduced a strange mix of strict training and humor. Scholars still argue whether his odd methods or sheer determination were what truly transformed the ragged army into a force that could stand its ground. The war drags on, years of skirmishes, marches, and uncertainty. But in the end, the impossible happens. The colonies secure their independence, a fragile victory inked into existence with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. And just like that, a new nation stands where 13 colonies once struggled. It doesn't feel polished or certain. It feels shaky, like a newborn taking its first steps. But it is alive, and the world can't ignore it. The war is over, the fires die down, and in the quiet aftermath, you can almost hear a deep sigh ripple across the land. The United States has been born, not yet strong, not yet secure, but undeniably real. The night air is filled with the faint crackle of celebration fires and the soft hum of hope, fragile but steady. The war leaves behind more questions than answers. Independence has been won, but now comes the harder part, deciding what, exactly, this new United States will look like. Imagine the air after the cannons fall silent. Fields are scarred, towns carry the weight of loss, and yet everywhere you turn there's talk of building something lasting out of the chaos. The Constitution is debated in stuffy rooms where the summer heat clings to powdered wigs and ink-stained hands. Men argue late into the night, candles flickering, voices rising and falling. They speak of checks and balances, of freedoms and responsibilities, of how to keep a fragile republic from collapsing under its own weight. The mainstream fact is that these debates produced the Constitution in 1787, a document still alive today. The quirky detail? The room was so hot during those sessions in Philadelphia that delegates often kept windows shut to keep eavesdroppers out, turning their workspace into a stifling oven of secrecy. Scholars still argue whether the Constitution was truly a democratic leap forward or more of a careful safeguard for the elites who shaped it. Life under this new government is unsteady, like a ship testing the waves. Washington takes the presidency, not with cheers of celebrity, but with the solemn weight of duty. His farewell address, years later, warns against entangling alliances and bitter parties, words that echo quietly long after the parchment fades. In these early decades, America feels like a grand experiment, one that might succeed or might just as easily unravel. But the nation doesn't stand still. You hear the creak of wagons rolling westward, the sound of rivers crossed by ferries, the call of land stretching far beyond the horizon. Expansion becomes the heartbeat of the young republic. Families pack their lives into wooden carts, children clutching dolls or books, while adults scan the horizon with wary hope. The Louisiana Purchase doubles the size of the country almost overnight, and suddenly the map feels vast, almost endless. The mainstream fact: Thomas Jefferson purchased that territory in 1803 for about 4 cents an acre. The odd detail: many Americans at the time weren't thrilled. They thought it was too much useless wilderness. Scholars still argue whether Jefferson overstepped his constitutional powers or acted out of a visionary instinct for the nation's future. Picture yourself walking the dusty trail of a frontier settlement. Cabins rise from freshly cut logs, smoke curls lazily from chimneys, and the air smells of pine and soil. Nights are quiet except for the rustle of wildlife, and mornings begin with the swing of an axe splitting wood. It's a life of hard labor, but also of possibility. Land is freedom, land is wealth, and land is the promise that the republic might truly endure. Yet expansion is never simple. The land isn't empty. It's home to countless native peoples whose worlds are disrupted, displaced, or destroyed by the steady push westward. For a sleepy retelling, we keep the details soft, but it's impossible not to feel the tension in the air. The frontier is both hope and heartbreak, both growth and loss. The decades roll forward, and America grows restless with ambition. New states join the Union, rivers are navigated by steam, and cities buzz with the rhythm of trade. You can almost hear the whistle of a steamboat on the Mississippi, the hum of markets alive with chatter, the hammering of new buildings rising from the earth. This is an America in motion. Farmers till the soil, merchants tally their ledgers, and inventors tinker late into the night. The Industrial Revolution creeps across the Atlantic and takes root here, quietly at first, then loudly with the clang of machinery. Railroads stretch like veins across the land, connecting distant towns, shrinking the continent into something more manageable. The hum of progress grows louder, a steady lull that carries the young nation forward. But with growth comes friction. Some see progress, others see imbalance. The North and South begin to diverge, economically, culturally, morally. At first, it's just murmurs, disagreements over tariffs or trade. But as the decades pass, the differences deepen. You can almost feel it in the air, the heaviness of a storm building far out to sea. The Union is young, ambitious, and fragile, and the weight of its contradictions presses harder with each passing year. And yet, as the 19th century unfolds, the United States continues to grow stronger. It's a place of contradictions, yes, but also of energy. Each frontier crossed, each invention sparked, each state admitted feels like another step toward something larger. The nights may still be long, the winters harsh, the politics messy, but there is a momentum that refuses to stop. Somewhere, on a quiet frontier night, a family gathers by a small fire. The air smells of wood smoke, the stars blaze bright overhead, and the silence of the wilderness is broken only by the chirp of crickets. In moments like this, you realize the story of America isn't just about documents and battles. It's about countless lives lived in pursuit of something better. And as you listen to that soft fire crackle, you sense that the young nation, uncertain though it may be, is here to stay. The drumbeat of expansion has a darker undertone now. Beneath the hum of railroads and the glow of new cities, an old question grows louder. Can a nation divided by slavery truly endure? The issue isn't new. It's been there since the founding. But by the mid-1800s it can't be ignored. You hear it in the sharp debates of Congress, in the fiery sermons echoing from pulpits, in the whispers of families torn between loyalty and morality. The mainstream fact is that the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln was the spark that lit the Civil War. The quirky detail? Lincoln wasn't even on the ballot in several southern states. Yet his victory was enough to trigger secession. Scholars still argue whether the war was fought more for preserving the Union or for abolishing slavery. But either way, the storm had broken. Imagine the sound of that storm. Cannons thunder, rifles crack, but between the battles are the long stretches of waiting, the mud, the hunger, the endless march. Soldiers sleep on the cold ground, their breath misting in the night air, boots worn thin. Letters home are folded carefully, carrying words of love, fear, and longing across a fractured land. And then, the turning point, Gettysburg, 1863. 3 days of battle that leave the fields heavy with silence once the smoke clears. You can almost hear that silence, heavy and thick, as if the land itself pauses to mourn. The war drags on, relentless, until Appomattox in 1865, when the surrender feels less like victory and more like sheer exhaustion. The United States survives, but scarred, stitched back together with fragile thread. Lincoln's assassination soon after adds a ghostly weight to the era. The nation grieves, not just for the man, but for what his loss might mean for healing. Reconstruction follows, a time of hope and struggle. Freedmen test their new rights, schools spring up, but the backlash is swift and fierce. The night air in the South carries both the hum of progress and the sharp sting of resistance. It's a contradiction, like so much of America's story. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. By the 1870s, though, a new rhythm begins. Railroads knit the country closer together, steel bridges span wide rivers, and cities grow upward as much as outward. Factories hum, their machines clattering through the night, the glow of furnaces lighting the sky. This is the Gilded Age, a time when wealth glitters on the surface, even as hardship lingers underneath. The mainstream fact: men like Rockefeller and Carnegie build fortunes that reshape industry. The odd detail: Carnegie once worked in a cotton mill as a boy, changing bobbins for pennies, before rising to become one of the richest men alive. Scholars still argue whether the titans of industry were captains of progress or robber barons who exploited the weak. Picture yourself walking through a late 19th century city street. Gas lamps flicker in the evening mist, horse-drawn carriages clatter across cobblestones, and vendors call out the day's wares. The air smells of coal smoke and fresh bread, a strange mix of grime and comfort. There's excitement here, immigrants arriving by the thousands, children running through crowded tenements, inventors showing off electric lights for the first time. And yet, in the quiet corners, poverty hums like a low note. Families squeeze into cramped apartments. Workers labor long hours in dangerous factories, and strikes erupt with chants that echo into the night. It's a restless energy, both inspiring and unsettling, as if the country is testing just how far it can stretch without breaking again. The frontier, too, still calls. Cowboys drive cattle under endless skies. Railroads slice across plains once roamed freely by native tribes, and towns rise almost overnight. A saloon piano tinkles in the background, its notes drifting into the dusty air. The frontier feels romantic in stories, but in truth, it's harsh, lonely, and often bloody. Expansion continues, relentless, until the continent feels fully claimed. By the century's end, the United States is no longer a fragile experiment. It's becoming something else, a nation of scale, of ambition, of contradictions held together by sheer momentum. From the silence of battlefields to the hum of factories, the rhythm of America grows louder, steadier, more certain. And as you drift in that rhythm, you realize the story has only just begun. By the dawn of the 20th century, America's restlessness has pushed beyond its own borders. The Spanish-American War of 1898 is short, fierce, and decisive. Out of it, the United States suddenly finds itself with overseas territories: Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. For the first time, the Republic is no longer just a continental power. It feels as if the map itself has stretched, the stars on the flag shining a little brighter in foreign waters. The mainstream fact: the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor was the rallying cry for war. The quirky detail: remember the Maine, became such a popular slogan that it was painted on walls, buttons, even candy wrappers. Scholars still argue whether the ship's sinking was caused by a Spanish mine or simply an accident. With victory comes a new confidence. Industry hums, cities glow brighter, and the nation strides into the new century with the swagger of youth. Yet, only a decade later, the world erupts into the Great War. America hesitates at first, watching Europe tear itself apart. You can almost hear the distant thunder of artillery across the Atlantic, muffled but insistent. Then, in 1917, the United States joins. Doughboys march in muddy trenches, their songs mixing with the groan of artillery. The war ends in 1918, leaving the world weary and reshaped. Back home, the 1920s sparkle with energy. Jazz drift from smoky clubs, radios hum with music and news, and the hum of automobiles fills the streets. Imagine neon lights flickering against brick walls, couples dancing late into the night, speakeasies hidden behind unmarked doors. It's the roaring 20s, a time of both thrill and excess. The mainstream fact: Prohibition banned alcohol. The odd detail: doctors could still prescribe whiskey for medical purposes, and millions of prescriptions were written. Scholars still argue whether Prohibition strengthened morality or only fueled crime. But the laughter fades when the Great Depression strikes. The stock market crash of 1929 ripples outward, and suddenly the hum of progress feels like it's been switched off. Bread lines stretch down city streets. Families huddle in shanty towns called Hoovervilles, and the air grows heavy with worry. Nights are quieter now, less jazz, more silence, broken only by the shuffle of weary footsteps. Roosevelt's New Deal tries to rekindle hope. It's programs like soft lamps in a dark room. It's survival, not prosperity, but survival matters. Then, once again, the world calls. World War II erupts, and after Pearl Harbor in 1941, America joins fully. Factories roar back to life. Women roll up their sleeves and fill assembly lines, while soldiers cross oceans into distant battles. You can almost hear the steady rhythm of typewriters, telegraphs, and footsteps on barracks floors. The war is global, immense, but by 1945, America emerges not just victorious, but transformed. The mainstream fact: the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending the war. The odd detail: in New York, people celebrated VJ Day so wildly that strangers kissed in the streets, captured forever in that famous photograph. Scholars still argue whether the bombings were necessary to end the war quickly or an avoidable tragedy. When the dust settles, the United States is no longer just a participant in world affairs. It's a superpower. Its cities glow with post-war optimism, suburbs spread outward, highways hum with cars, and televisions flicker in living rooms. The Cold War begins, a rivalry with the Soviet Union that stretches like a shadow across the decades. It's not fought with muskets or trenches, but with rockets, spies, and ideas. You hear it in the launch of Sputnik, a faint beeping from orbit that jolts the night sky. You feel it in the duck-and-cover drills of schoolchildren, hiding under desks as though thin wood could shield against nuclear fire. The air is charged, tense, yet somehow routine. Daily life continues, even as the possibility of sudden destruction lingers just beneath the surface. And through it all, the United States grows stronger. Its economy surges, its culture spreads, its influence deepens. From a handful of colonies by the Atlantic, it has become a nation that shapes the entire world. Yet, as you listen to this story in the quiet of the night, what you feel isn't just the power or the ambition. It's the long, steady rhythm of endurance. From fragile beginnings to continental expansion, from civil war to industrial might, from world wars to Cold War standoffs, the story hums with both triumph and struggle. The United States is many things: imperfect, restless, ambitious, but above all, it endures. And as you drift now, perhaps you can hear that hum not as noise, but as a lullaby, steady, unbroken, carrying you deeper into rest. This 30-minute sleep history video gently guides you through the story of how the United States was born and grew stronger, told in a calm, reflective tone designed to soothe you as you drift off. Beginning with the fragile colonial settlements along the Atlantic coast, You follow the struggles of early settlers before slipping into the rising restlessness that led to independence. Taxes, protests, the Boston Tea Party, and the long Revolutionary War carried on by Washington's determination. From there, the story softens into the new nation's early years, with the Constitution debated in stifling candlelit rooms, wagons creaking westward through the frontier, and the vast Louisiana Purchase opening endless land. The mood flows quietly into the Civil War, with muskets cracking in morning fog, Gettysburg's heavy silence, and Lincoln's solemn leadership, before gliding into Reconstruction, the hum of railroads, the glow of factories, and the glitter of the Gilded Age. As the 20th century dawns, the United States expands outward, winning a quick war with Spain, sending soldiers to muddy trenches in World War I, and dancing through the roaring 20s before stumbling into the stillness of the Great Depression. Factories roar back to life during World War II, carrying America to victory, and by the Cold War era, the nation emerges as a global superpower. Throughout the narration, you hear not just the big milestones, but quirky details and quiet scholarly debates that bring the past alive without disturbing your rest. Finally, the story settles into a gentle closing scene, where America's map glows softly under moonlight, rivers shine like silver threads, and history itself fades into a lullaby. As the last words remind you, there's nothing more you need to do tonight. Just let go and drift into sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams. The story pauses here, at the midpoint of the 20th century, where the United States stands tall but wary, powerful but restless. You've walked through centuries tonight, colonies huddled on a coastline, battles in muddy fields, cities glowing with new light, and voices echoing across oceans. Yet now, in the hush of this moment, it's time to let the past settle, like dust drifting slowly back to the earth. Picture yourself standing at a quiet overlook. Below you, the map of America stretches out, not as a battlefield or a factory floor, but as a calm landscape under moonlight. Rivers gleam like silver threads, mountains rest as dark silhouettes, and towns sparkle faintly, like stars scattered across the ground. The noise of history fades until it's only a whisper, just enough to remind you it's there, but not enough to keep you awake. Take a slow breath in and let it out. Notice how the weight of these centuries no longer feels heavy, but gentle, like a blanket settling around your shoulders. The rise and fall of empires, the clash of ideas, the hum of progress, they're all part of the rhythm that carries you softly forward. Now, imagine a quiet room. The lights are dim, maybe only a lamp glowing faintly in the corner. Outside, a breeze stirs the trees, and you can hear the faint hum of a fan, steady and soothing. History waits patiently. It doesn't mind if you drift off before the story continues. So let yourself rest. Let the echoes of muskets, the clatter of factories, and the whispers of crowded streets fade into silence. There is nothing more you need to do, nothing more you need to hold on to tonight. Just allow the stillness to rise up and carry you deeper into calm. End of script. Sweet dreams.